welcome to the forum Gender and Diversity in Tech, the second round. This is Bettina. Maybe you just introduce yourself very well yourself. Maybe I'll just give the word to you immediately. And yeah.
Okay. So thank you for coming to my talk about.
What's that?
Don't know.
Should I continue?
Where's it coming from?
I hope it's not the fire alarm. Hang on, let's just open the door and see. I think it's that box. It's coming from that one. It's coming from here. Oh yeah, there you go. Alright.
It's which one? It's a microphone. Take one.
Hello. I think yours.
1, 2, 2.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay. So thank you for coming to my talk about gender and diversity in tech.
Yeah.
So there's been.
Oh, maybe wait a second because there's a large number of people coming.
Okay.
Maybe there's some space over here. Ja, genau, wir haben es. Ist auf Englisch.
Ja, ist eine Übersetzung dabei?
Nee,
in Deutsch?
Auf Englisch selber nicht. Also mit Englisch. Ja, klar. Natürlich. Ja, natürlich schicke ich dir einfach. Alles klar, danke. Because they can't translate in English, and so they're going to different forms.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So thank you for coming to my talk about gender and diversity in tech. And the main problem with tech and diversity is that there's not a lot of diversity in tech. There's currently a lot of initiatives to get more women in tech, of which I'm a learner. I've benefited from these initiatives. I'm also an organizer and coach for Rails Girls Berlin, Open Tech School, and Closure Bridge. And these I can talk about during the open session if you're more interested in these initiatives. So basically today I will talk about 3 main problems / issues I want to draw your attention to about diversity in tech, and then I will present a few solutions on the personal side and also political side. So basically,
I can also just do this if it's better.
yeah, this might be better since
Yeah.
there's not more people.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the problem with women technology is not the women, is what I want to start with. And as I go through my talk, you'll probably see why. Next slide, please. So basically, I come from the US, where it's a given that diversity should be the default. And so the current state of technology right now is that's not very diverse. And basically, I want to expand the conversation beyond gender diversity, and I will talk about 3 different areas. Next slide, please. So first, I want to talk about the lack of intersectional diversity. And what I mean by intersectional is that, next slide, is that I'm quoting somebody here, Erica Joy Baker. She says, I quote her, "So this is important to us, we're working on it, it's often the message. The work though seems to favor one group more than others, women. So a lot of the work, including the ones I'm involved in, we're really focusing on women, and I want to expand the conversation." Next slide, please. So most of the conversation's on gender. Next slide. So where we talk about, okay, right now, most of the people who make technology are men, even though women are more than 50% of the people in the world. So right now there's a lot of talk about trying to get more women into technology. But I want to expand the conversation, next slide, and talk more about diversity beyond gender. There's a lot of diversity in terms of, next slide, not just gender, but also sexuality, religion, social economic class, education, physical ability, ethnicity, age, next slide, nationality, job level, body type, skin color. So this is not an exhaustive list, but I want you to think about what Annika and Lintner says. Next slide. So everybody belongs to many groups, not just one group. And diversity happens when you can't see a dominant group anymore because there isn't one. And this is what I want us to think about in terms of bringing diversity to tech. Next slide. So the second thing is that there's currently a lack of awareness that diversity is actually good for business, because the study has shown that diverse teams are more creative and come up with solutions faster. So when you're used to thinking about other people's perspectives and not just your own, you're much faster at coming up with solutions for a wider range of users. And so currently the people who build software are very homogeneous, so they're usually building for users just like them as a default. But if we had more diverse teams, then we can think about building for many different kinds of users' needs, and then you can actually capture more of the market share. So next slide. So when everybody's making technology, the technology they make will be for everyone, and then you can also address different target groups. So this is also good for business. And the third point is that I want to question, do we want diversity or do we want inclusiveness? Do we just want to tolerate that there's lots of different people, or do we want to welcome that people are different and that with these differences actually gives us new perspectives? Next slide, please. So basically, what I don't want to focus on is that certain people want to be treated as special, but more that we should be welcoming of everyone, because inclusiveness makes a better community for everyone. So next slide. So the core question that I want you to think about is that technology is the future, and who should be making that and why. So the next few slides I will talk about certain solutions. Next slide. So first we start with some personal solutions that everybody can do on their own. Basically, first we start with use your privilege for good. What I mean by this is everybody who's sitting here is probably pretty privileged. We're taking a Tuesday afternoon off to listen to somebody talk and being able to reflect on this. So use your privilege for good. For example, if you're a man and you hear some sort of sexist comment, you can stand up to this man, to men with sexist stereotypes, because they probably won't listen to what women have to say. 2, listen to people's stories. Maybe you say, hey, I've never experienced any kind of discrimination. I don't know what diversity can look like. There's definitely stories out there on the internet. You can read them and get a better understanding. 3, support the initiatives already out there and share what they're doing, which is what I'm doing about the initiatives I'm involved in. Next slide, please. However, I know that here there are some political actors, and because political actors have more power to change the social structures we live in, I have prepared a few suggestions just as ideas for the discussion area. So in education, there's a lot of research that have shown that elementary school teachers and college professors are critical in terms of the career choices people make. So one idea is to fund projects that teach teachers and childcare workers about how to combat stereotypes, as well as teach the history of diverse role models, so that they will encourage all children in all topics. 2, fund gender studies research about retaining mid-career women in technology. So there's a lot of pipeline initiatives right now, but the numbers show that about half the women who are mid-career in technology are leaving, and there's not a lot of research in terms of why or how to retain them. So there could be something done to prevent that. Next slide, please. So community. So there's a lot of grassroots initiatives being done already, so you can support these, sponsor existing community-based pipeline initiatives like Rails Girls Summer Code, Open Tech School, and Closure Bridge. I'm involved personally with many of these, so you can ask me about them during the open session. Also, to increase intersectional diversity in tech, you can fund self-organizing migrant foundations to organize hackathons and workshops for their communities. Next slide. Also in the realm of work, promote, support, and reward tech companies to reduce discrimination and implement diversity training, especially for hiring managers, since they're the gatekeepers to different roles within the company, and also implement salary transparency and equality, starting the government IT sector. Next slide. So basically, the key takeaway is something I found on Twitter. So I asked my network, hey, I've been invited to speak to German politicians about women in tech. What would you like them to know? And one of my fellow Rails girls said, hey, not a question, encourage them to make more female leaders. And I would like to expand this to say, make more diverse leaders. And this is a very good slide because, next slide please. I've actually done most of my research via Twitter and the internet for this presentation. So many of these ideas have come from leaders in the community. So I want to thank Helga Hansen, Annika Lindner, Uta Meyer, and Tui Le. Also, you may notice that the thank you is cats. In case that's not obvious, because sharing cat photos is one of the reasons why the internet has grown so much in the past 20 years. Research has shown. So next slide, please. So here's my resources in case you want to know more. So thank you.
Thank you, Bettina, for this second talk and a larger group sitting here. I'm sure there are lots of questions and interesting comments. Does anybody have a reaction to this already? Can be about the content of the presentation, about the organizations Bettina described, or the topic itself. Maybe you work in a startup or a tech company and notice the lack of diversity, or you're in a very unusual tech company and you have a very diverse crowd around you. No immediate reaction. Okay, maybe I would like to again ask you to explain us a little bit more about the work of Rails Girls and the different projects you mentioned, just because maybe not everybody knows them.
Okay, so I'm more of a participant in Rails Girls. I'm not on the core organizing team, so I speak from the experience of more of a participant. Basically, Rails Girls is a global movement that first started in Finland to get more women in Ruby on Rails, which is one of the biggest languages for making web applications. Basically 3 years ago, they had the first workshop in Berlin, and it was such a success that they decided to do it again. It was meant to just be a one-day workshop to bring together learners with volunteer coaches to make a web application in one day. So I went to one of these workshops. It was just, hey, I can build a web app in one day, sounds cool. And I showed up, and it was so exciting that I wanted to learn more, and I created one of the first study groups in Berlin, which meant that I met with a few other learners, like I think 6 women, and we had 2 coaches who helped us build a working web application, and we worked on it every week until it basically worked. And this group has actually continued for the last 3 years until now, and it has basically brought a few professional programmers out of the program.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question. I'll just put the mic there.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Norbert Ries from the Academy for Security Policy in Berlin. As far as I understood your thesis, your overall thesis is that technology is the future. Recently I read the sentence, children are the future. What do you answer? What is right? Technology or children? Thank you.
I don't think there has to be one answer. I mean, obviously, children are the future because they're going to grow up and all of us sitting here are going to die. So I won't argue with you. Children are the future, yes. Technology can also be the future. I don't see a controversy here.
Do you have a different opinion about it, or would you like to elaborate?
Well, it's not just for joking, but I guess your presentation is extremely technology-based and oriented, and business and so on, and the overall questions we have to answer when we are creating a company has to gather people and to answer social questions and to have something questions answered like leadership and so on. So it was too much one-dimensional, your presentation. That was the hidden message of my question. Thank you.
I see your point now. I only have 10 minutes, so but it was included in my abstract that actually, in the end, people make software for other people, right? So software programmers make, especially when we talk about the texting, obviously, okay, you can say you make software for, security reasons, maybe, but in the end, it's usually for people. And most of the people for whom you create software can't program. So that's why I'm advocating for a more diverse tech maker scene, because ultimately you're making software for everyone, or you should. So that was left out in my 10 minutes. You're welcome.
Maybe,
It's just for the live stream.
okay, for the live stream. Could you maybe, just to follow up on that, could you give us maybe some practical examples where, because nowadays the software developers also, the scene is so homogeneous, and it's, I guess, mostly males of a certain age programming the software. Where is the software not meeting the needs of those who use it? You know what I mean? Like, maybe you could just how is Google, when I type in something, how is this, like, to be provocative, not serving me as a female, or not serving somebody who's old or who's of a different ethnicity or something like that? Does it work better for white males?
Well, I don't know about Google, but for example, video games, right? So video games, the classic games we think of, like World of Warcraft or something like this, it has a very specific target audience, right? And I think in the last 10 years, there's been different kinds of people who make video games, different kind of video games that appeal to, not just women, but to people who aren't interested in, killing people, but maybe birds, angry birds. So basically what I'm trying to say is, at least in the world of video games, when you look at different people who make different kinds of games, this attracts different kinds of target audience. I don't know so much about Google, but I do know for web standards, for example, there's something called reader view. So basically any of the text you put in, if people have the reader view programmed in, then for somebody who can't read, they have the text read out to them. So for blind people, this helps them also participate in the digital world and be able to listen to websites instead of reading them. So that's an example.
Do you have another?
No, I mean, because I totally get where you're going at. I mean, maybe we could try to think a little bit about what's specific about the tech scene or this. I know nothing of this. I come from a completely different sector. Because a lot of the things that you say are generally valid for the working world, for economy, for political positions that men and white men, heterosexual, are usually in power positions, and the more diverse people are more working in bad jobs, etc. So, wow.
Sorry.
No,
That's my backup slide.
So,
I took that out.
so I mean, a lot of those problems are just things that we face also in other parts of society or in different economic sectors. So what is maybe so specific? Is it even worse in the tech scene, or is it because you think that little bit what you said, that technology is so important, maybe more important than who was, selling our milk, or...
Also, I would like to comment on that and also make this open this floor to have a bit more of a group discussion. So you're all invited. But what I was thinking about was just that I think maybe the point you were also trying to make is that texting in general is an economic field, and the fact that so much software is actually specifically programmed for white men, not because made by them, and therefore addresses them mostly, means that you don't use or you don't target all the possible groups, and it would make economic sense to have a diverse programming group, because it would mean that you could actually maybe profit more from it. That's a very economic point of view, and it's certainly not the entirely true or the only one, but I think that's one of the important points. It's not only what is our future, but it's really when you're in that scene, it simply makes sense. I think, yeah. Anybody else have a different opinion about that, maybe? Bettina, would you like to add something to what she just said?
I think I'm with you. You know, diversity should be the default, not just in tech, but you know, in other. For the person who delivers your milk, maybe, I don't know. But I mean, it's a huge social problem that's outside of tech. But I think right now technology is really something, like I said, it's really part of the future. It's really shaping how we live our lives. I mean, when you're in the U-Bahn, you see everybody on their mobile phones. So I definitely think it's something that touches everybody's lives, and this is something to think about.
Is there another question? Oh yeah.
Can you address successful methods how to bring diversity into software engineering?
Maybe you would like to say something?
It's difficult.
How many time have we got?
How much time, Anna?
I actually think that the Rails Girls initiative is quite successful for what they do. So basically, I mentioned that you start with this one-day workshop, and if you're interested, you can join a study group that meets regularly once a week for several months. And if you're really interested in becoming a professional developer, you can do a Rails Girls Summer of Code program, which means you're coding full-time over a summer. And this basically prepares you to have like a portfolio project so you can apply to be a junior developer somewhere. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know that they've gotten lots of women into technology. And I think that's a pretty successful effort.
You also briefly mentioned the importance of education in general. What, in your opinion, maybe connected to the question before, would be important in the overall, education system in Germany, but maybe in general?
So some of the research I looked at in preparation for this talk focused more on the US, but basically they noticed that, for example, elementary school teachers already steer girls and boys towards specific subjects. And that's why one of my recommendations, I said, okay, teachers have to know that they're already doing this, and to actively encourage all children in all topics.
Another question from the room, or maybe a comment as well. This is not, I'm sure there are a lot of experts in this room as well. So if there's any other idea on this, would you like to? Yeah? Sure.
Well, what about creativity?
Maybe elaborate.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you talk about creating new software approaches, new algorithms, you have to touch on a theory of creativity. How does it happen? What's the overall role of creativity in this diverse group?
Okay, so I think in a diverse team, they're more creative because they have different perspectives to kind of bounce ideas off of. I mean, I notice this also in my work. I don't know, is anybody creative in their work? Please raise your hands. So in my world, I talk to people with different points of view than I do to get feedback on my idea, and that helps me be more creative. I don't know, how are other people creative in their work? Anybody? What, the microphone?
Well, yeah, all right.
I'm working together with an American colleague who is actually usually the
support for innovative ideas usually is towards young people coming freshly out of universities, young startups. This colleague is a brilliant developer. He has many years of experience in the global market, and he realized that there's a certain software that SMEs need, but there isn't available. So not from any small companies, nor from the big ones as well. So he sat down for a couple of years and developed it himself. And so it's kind of based on you have to be creative, but also there's a certain level of experience. I think that's very useful in order to really come up with a viable product.
And research.
Yeah. And as far as I think particularly in the US, children are already using computers in grade school, right? Whereas here in Europe, or particularly in Germany, that unfortunately is not the case. So small children that actually grow up with using that type of technology will be much more apt to glide into it when they're adults.
Yeah, I definitely notice who's German and who's American because I can touch type, and apparently none of the Germans can.
Yeah.
That's actually what I wanted to ask you about. Do you, also in regard to diversity in the scene in general, but what are the core differences, in your opinion, or in the scene you experience in the US and Germany and in the realm of tech? And to the better or worse, I don't know if, yeah.
So I think in the US there's a longer history of working and thinking about diversity. Just because of the history of the US, it's a more diverse country, and there's also, this history of slavery, so there's something we have to work on. Whereas in Germany, that doesn't seem to be something that's much thought about or talked about until very recently. So I feel that in the States, people take it as a given. So when I gave this talk as a practice round to people, one of the Germans said, "Bettina, you really have to make it clear that diversity is a problem and that it's good to be diverse for your German audience, because I think for me as an American, I take it kind of for granted, but apparently in Germany this really has to be still talked about." I don't know, but that's my American perspective. Maybe Germans in here can give their perspective.
Is there, well, I'm also curious actually, is there someone in this group who experienced maybe their employer or the scene they work in to be a very diverse scene, and could comment on the advantages of that or disadvantages? Nobody sees their work as a diverse scene, I take it from that. So this is actually a case in point. Okay, yeah.
I guess when you think about it, I mean, there could be two aspects. One is that the employers are discriminating against minorities, that they flat out think, yeah, this woman developer, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And the other thing could be, which I imagine is also very relevant, that there are just very few female developers, and there are very few female engineers. I mean, if you go to a university and you look who's studying physics or who's studying engineering, most of them are men. So where should they come from, if they haven't learned that? And this same thing goes for the other, the kindergartens. There are very few male kindergartners, even though now they think, oh, it's really great to have some men for our little children, and they look around and there are almost none, and if there are a few, everybody wants to have them. So I could imagine if you're a really good female developer, a lot of companies will also want to employ you. So what would you say is more of the problem? So do you know of any, or when you did your research, is there also some flat out discrimination, that it's tough to get a job, or is it more the problem that there's a lack of supply of diverse, that you should go, yeah?
I don't think anybody's straight out trying to discriminate against women. I think it's more about what kind of culture there is. Is it welcoming for people who are different, or for a not so homogeneous team? And I also think you're right, okay, there's also what they call pipeline problem. There's not enough people coming into the pipe. And there's initiatives working on that, but one of the things I looked at in my research is that there's half the number of women who are already in tech who are leaving, and
Why?
exactly why. And this is something I suggested that there should be funding or somebody should look into that because there's not a lot of research on that yet.
So that would be one of your suggestions as well, to increase funding of research looking into diversity and gender diversity.
Yeah.
And when I understood you correctly, or maybe I misunderstood you, but according to you, there is a certain bias of projects, or more projects focusing really on the gender part than the diversity part. Maybe you could elaborate on that. Where do you think it is coming from, and is it really a rivalry between the two, or
rivalry between
diversity projects and gender, and projects focusing mainly on gender?
I don't see that as a rivalry. I think it's just the start. There's a lot of focus on gender diversity right now, which I think is great because that is something we should look for, more gender diversity. But I want to just draw the attention to there's also other kinds of diversity to take into consideration, and not to only focus on women. I think it's great to focus on that, but to also expand it and look at other kinds of diversity besides gender diversity.
And according to you, what would be the biggest obstacle to promoting diversity in the startup or in the tech scene? Or according to you, what's been the biggest obstacle?
I will have to think about this, because I think it's I think there's already some work being done, the initiatives I'm involved in, and as for why it hasn't been, a priority for certain startups, this, I don't know if I can answer for them, but I think, like I said, one of the key problems is lack of awareness that diversity is actually good for business, because I think a lot of startups, maybe they're so business focused that they think only about numbers, and it's not that they just don't want, it's just not a high priority. I don't know, but that's just a guess. I don't know, maybe somebody here can speak to their startup.
I would like to make a provocative point maybe there, by quoting Alan Powell, which I did in the first. Alan Powell used to work as a venture capitalist, used to work for Reddit, and there was a case about a big scandal, let's say, about sexism at Reddit, which made her even more famous about in the scene. I think talking about gender and diversity in tech, and she wrote an article saying, if the firm or startup or wherever you're applying makes it their focal point to, or one of their goals to support gender diversity in their firm, and doesn't succeed, it's either because it's not actually their intention or because they're incompetent, and either way you shouldn't work for them. And so maybe that is one of the reasons why women leave these firms. I was wondering if you could just react to that sort of idea that really they're just fed up with their experiences maybe, or it's just really very negative experiences in not being promoted, or maybe even sexism in general. Maybe you have some experiences to share even from other people.
I think it's I don't know if I can categorically say that for all startups, right? That's pretty generalizing.
It was meant to be provocative.
And yeah, so I don't know if I can speak to that.
Okay, are there any more ideas, comments, or questions? If there's,
Yes, my question is how can developers integrate diversity aspects in their daily work? So I think there have to be economic impacts for the companies, otherwise they won't do it. Are there any arguments or have you any numbers about this?
About having diverse teams bring better solutions.
No. How you can motivate companies to consider on diversity aspects in giving programmers the deal to integrate diverse aspects in their planning and programming.
I think there's two things here. So I think many companies can look at the research. There's lots of research about how diverse teams are better for business. As for the teams themselves, I think change is hard for everybody about everything, and it's not going to work if it comes from HR or top down. Hey, you need to have an extra token woman on your team. I think it has to really come from people seeing the value from themselves and wanting that for themselves and changing the culture to make it more welcoming for people who are different than they are.
I'm so sorry. I came late and I missed your presentation, but I'm still going to join in if I may. And that is that here in Germany with us on a voluntary basis, that hasn't worked at all. So I think it's like there's only just by now, after years and years of goodwill and trying to convince and argue with the cases and the figures and everything, politics have finally come in with a quota for women in boards, because the male networks are just incredibly strong. I mean, it's much more hierarchical here, the culture of businesses, than in the UK or America, in the whole Anglo-Saxon world. I think it's completely different, and I think there's only one way, and that is from top down and with a quota, probably, because people have tried. I mean, this is just about business culture now.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, which you have, I'm sure, debated is education for girls. I mean, starting very early on to remove barriers to, we call them MINT, what is it? Maths and physics and programming and everything for girls.
Yeah, I think those are good initiatives. Yeah, I think those are good initiatives. Yeah.
And I think it's got to, there's got to be a lobby to help the break, the changes.
One approach that is actually came from the US, also applied in Germany, is that so-called Girls' Day once a year. I think it originally started with IBM, and I think companies actually do have Girls' Day and invite female students, and but nothing really comes out of these things. Maybe it's just once a year event, but maybe that should be supported more, and these girls interested in the IT sector should be promoted better in a better way by the companies that are doing these girls' days, and maybe by their teachers as well.
Yeah.
Other similar initiatives could maybe be kicked off too.
Yeah, I think, as long as people are thinking about it and working on it, it's always a good thing. So, yeah, I think Girls' Day, yeah.
Girls do have ideas too, and one would be shortchanging oneself with not integrating those ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more than just in one day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so spread the word is one of the core aspects, and accept that diversity is an important point to make in the firm and in the scene. Okay, if there are no further questions, I think we can close this forum, and I would like to invite you all, first of all, thank you, Bettina, for this expertise. And I would like to invite everyone to first of all, to dinner downstairs in this house and in the other house at 6 o'clock. And then to come to the panel discussion at 7:10 in house 1. So you can have dinner in this house and then come back later depending on your preference. And also I would like to invite you back tomorrow, where we will have a lot more forums and actually a fishbowl discussion in the end of the day, where we really want everybody to participate and bring in ideas from the forums you went into today and tomorrow. So thank you, and see you later.